Hi, everyone. Happy August, if you can believe it. My name is Elisa Camahort Page, and I'm one of the co founders of Optionality, which is a community for people who are exploring, have executed on, and want to continuously improve their optionality driven life. And we always have a theme for our months. And this month's theme, this summer's theme was my analog summer, how to, ironically, get a little bit more offline. And this month, we're digging deeper into some of the components that we feel are critical to having an analog summer, which is joy, which is rest, which is fun, and which is play, which brings me to our guest today, Shirin Etessam, who is the founder of the Slay Agency, but also the author of the book Free to Be, a 6 week guide to reclaiming your soul. And she has an entire chapter dedicated to play in her book. And so when I knew we were doing this for our topics we were going to dig deeper into for August, I'm like, I got to get Shirin. So thank you, Shirin, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, so we're just going to talk a little bit about play, but I always like to start with a bit of an origin story question, which is, since we're talking about play, were you a playful child? How did you play as a kid? Like, what was your play favorites? What were your favorite ways to play?
This is an interesting question because from the age of 0 to 9, I was in Iran and under a different government. And I really had an idyllic childhood. We would spend summers in, from year 6 to 9 in the UK, but otherwise in Iran. And Iranian families tend to be very, very tight, and not just like the family unit, but extended family. Yeah. So my besties were all my cousins, and everybody was around the same age, like within a 5-year window. And we were always at each other's homes. And, back then, no internet, right. No cell phones. So my parents would literally like call, uncles and aunts, like, is Shirin and my sister's name is Lily. Are they there? No? Okay. Yeah. And then they're like, oh, I heard they're going to be at so-and-so's house. And so we were constantly together. And then we had this house at the Caspian Sea. And that was just heavenly. We would there were so many things that we would dream up, but always like collectively, whether it was like Tarzan or, we just made up all sorts of different stories and scenarios and played them out, and different adventures, but really collective. And I mean, when I look back at my childhood, which I know is pretty rare, it's just, I loved it. And I would say I played throughout.
You remind me that, I grew up here in California. I was born and raised here in California, but both my parents were immigrants. And my dad, when he got his citizenship by marrying my mom, and then he brought over his parents and 7 of his siblings. And they all settled in the Bay Area. And every Sunday we would get together at my grandparents' house. And eventually, I was kind of in this, there's a first wave of older cousins who I kind of looked up to, and, they were like teenagers when I was in my single digits, and I was like, oh, they're so cool. And then there was like, I'm this little middle wave. And then there was a big third wave of kids that I would babysit and stuff and make up stories and tell stories to. But every Sunday we would get together, and it really was, it was just a time when there was no structured idea for what the kids were supposed to do while the parents were eating and drinking and probably smoking back then in the 60s and 70s. And, the parents were doing their thing, and the kids were just like, boom, go off, have play. Right. And we were of this varying, pretty widely varying ages. So yeah, I just remember it being super unstructured and just kind of everyone, a million different things going on, and just for hours until it got dark. And then the parents were collecting their kids and heading out to their respective homes. So I totally relate to what you're saying, and had that big family every
And
Sunday.
unstructured is quite key for play, and the freedom to play. If it
Yeah.
becomes too structured, then you're probably not playing.
Okay. So, and by the way, anyone who's watching live, either on YouTube or on LinkedIn, if you drop a question in, we will see it and we can answer it. And later, I'm going to ask Shirin some brain sciencey stuff about play. So we're going there. So if you have questions, but before we get into that, I'm just wondering, what led you to write this book that is like a 6-week guide, as I said, and you walk. It's very much. There's information, there's both personal anecdote and science information, and there's work. It's like a workshop at the end of every chapter where you have a lot of exercises and things to do to try to reclaim your soul. And you devoted an entire chapter, an entire week in your 6-week program to play. And so I'm wondering what led you to that point and to realizing that play was something you wanted to focus on.
Well, it came naturally because it was a part of my process. So just very, very quickly, the first part of the book is broken up into 2 parts. The first is all the things you need to do to get yourself ready and to excavate your soul. And then the other is once you find your soul, because it's not necessarily easy to find, what do you do with it? And for me, the number one way of amplifying my soul has been through play. And I can expand on that. But the reason I wrote the book is because I went through a big breakup and I was on my knees, and it was one of those life moments where I questioned everything, and I just didn't want to do things the way that I'd always done them. And so the book was very cathartic for me and transformative. And, it's something, the process took me 6 years, so, as I say in the book, if I knew what I was doing, because I was sort of like bobbing for spiritual apples,
I like that.
if I knew what I was doing, that I could have streamlined it into 6 weeks. So that is what I did. And it's meant to be really pocketbookish and easy to do. So you don't have to go and sit on a mountaintop and ohm it out, but really incorporate it into your work, relationships, play, life. Yeah.
Cool. So when I posted an excerpt from your book on optionality this week. It was from chapter 4, which is about play. And one of our community members, Helen Johnson, left a really interesting comment, which is that for her, it broadened the definition of play, and that you could apply play in different areas of your life where maybe you didn't think it applied. And then later, that prompted me. I don't know if you saw it, but I shared the newsletter from my personal LinkedIn, and I recorded my own little video about a really, really funny thing that happened at work that I hadn't thought about in a while, because it probably happened about 10, 15 years ago. But we were trying to make the best of a bad situation. And I just kind of did not a prank, but I just did something explicitly like out of the norm, excuse me, out of the box. And we laugh about it to this day, the coworker and I that it happened with. And she messaged me immediately, and she was like, I watched your video. I could tell the story with you word for word. And I laughed and laughed. I hadn't thought about that in a while. And that was such a funny day. And and that was at work, right? That was a work, stressful work situation. And you tell a story that's in the excerpt about trying to de-stress at work. So what is this broad definition of play? Because I do think you kind of take it out of the way we might normally think of what play is.
I think that the easiest way of explaining play is what musicians and artists call being in your flow.
Okay.
is a matter of, and also it takes it out of the, the realm of woo woo. It's purely when you are tapped into a state of purity and creativity that has always been there, but has been covered up and blocked and so forth. So many studies, and frankly, recent studies, even after I wrote my book, that have researched the brain and how ingrained play is, the urge to play, the necessity to play, not just in humans, but also in animals. So it doesn't have anything like to do with the cerebral cortex. It's deeply, deeply ingrained in the mind. So, so it is a state of flow, creativity, freedom, and power that we all have and came naturally to us as children before the brain took over, before the amygdala decided to rule. I call her Amy G. Dalla. Amy and I have a love-hate relationship. And it is there accessible for all of us. What I have learned since the writing of my book is, like any other habit, it really is a matter of practicing. So you can call me a play practitioner now because I am in the practice of playing. It still doesn't come naturally to me. Sometimes it comes in spontaneously, but it doesn't always come naturally. So I bake it in I have made it a habit to play.
Tell me more about your use of the word power, because I'm not sure that's a word I would associate with play. And so what do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is resiliency and the ability to tap into a core that is untouchable from the outside world. So that I see it kind of as this reservoir, this island within me, and it's what fuels me deep in my core, that when poop hits the fan, and poop has been hitting the fan worldwide, that I go to this center and I gain my fuel and I gain my strength and my power, and no one can touch it.
So really power almost has a double meaning. There's like power, but there's power like you power up your phone. There's energy. There's like
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so that's interesting. That's
Though that power can lead to power, and not power as in a ego chest thumping, but as in like Wonder Woman.
Got it. I love that. I love that. In the book and in the chapter that we excerpted, you talk about the brain science of what play does for our brain. And you talk about neuroplasticity, which is a very hot topic right now, about how we can still change our brains, that we are not permanently hardwired. And the way you feel today, doesn't necessarily have to be the way you feel tomorrow. So tell me a little bit about, how did you go about researching this portion of it? Who are your go-to resources? And what did you learn about why play is great for the brain?
Well, it did take a bit of research, and mind you, this is pre-Chat GPT. You know what I mean? So
we all used to research pre-Chat GPT. That's true.
Actually had to. Yeah, I used to make fun of my parents because at that time they relied on the encyclopedia, and our age we had Google, and now it's Chat GPT. But so quite a bit of research. I also, as you know, reached out to Dr. Stuart Brown of the Institute for Play. And he was very resourceful, and many of the studies are from the institute, and Dr. Brown plus others, other resources. There are numerous studies within the last 5 years that have been done on the science and the benefits of play, and it's scientifically proven now that play can rewire the mind with endorphins and serotonin, and permanently. So it's not a temporary state of being, that if you do it enough times and make it a pattern and a habit, that it will shift it. And whether that is combating depression, or a lack of creativity, whatever it is, that whether it's a mental health issue or a physical issue that's brought on by stress, there's many benefits.
You're making me think of, I don't know if it's so on trend right now, but of course there was a huge movement in the therapeutic world of like you're talking to your inner child, taking care of your inner child, being there for your inner child. And a lot of it, I felt like, at least in my experience of it at the time, was about sort of having empathy for yourself and taking care of yourself and nurturing yourself in a way that maybe you didn't get. But I wonder if there is also this element of letting your, by taking care of your inner child and letting them and tapping into the element of play, if that's another aspect of like working with working with your inner child to like improve your mental health. Did that come up at all in the stuff you were researching?
Inner child, it's interesting because when one talks about inner child, we're often talking about heart. And I concentrate on a lot in the book. I talk about the soul, because if you're looking at humans holistically, we've got the mind that's always, it's like chief, it's like either CFO or COO.
Right.
And the heart is the, I would say the CFO, that's always on alert.
Right.
The body is the COO. The heart is chief people officer.
Uh-huh.
And really it's the soul that needs to be the CEO, because you take cues from all of them, but then it's just like, hold off. I'm driving this bus, So inner child has a lot to do with taking care of your heart, which I think is really important. Mm-hmm. But people say follow your heart, and I don't think that is is good advice, because the heart is like a child. So it might want a popsicle 1 hour, then it might want a nap or should take a nap. It may be upset with you, it might be whatever it is. Whereas in the soul is what's wise and clear and so forth. And it's frankly in the state of play when you are within that space. So being in that flow state is actually, there's a reason why they call it soul music, because you are in that flow and you are, you have that clarity, you have that ancient wisdom, you have that stamina that just comes from shutting off the white noise and tapping into what's real. And I know that some of this might sound woo-woo, but the truth of it is, if you think about it in vis-a-vis work life, the time that you feel the most connected. Dr. Brown did a series of interviews with Nobel laureates, and so many of them said that for them, work is play. that,
Hmm.
that there is no distinction. So I know that there's some people in some viewers that are rolling their eyes and like, oh yeah, the soul and all of that. You could call it whatever you want, whether it's flow state, state of play, whatever that is. If you are not bringing your full self, and if you're not allowing yourself, your authentic self, to and through the work you are doing, you are going through the steps. That there isn't the if there is no joy at work, there's a reason for it. And
Yeah.
I can argue that it doesn't matter what position you're in or what kind of work you're doing. But that's
Yeah.
a bigger conversation.
Yeah, no, I love what you're saying about the soul being about some sort of innate wisdom and clarity, which I think a lot of us struggle with clarity. Um, because I think that that is something people do say follow your heart. Sometimes they say go with your gut, which I guess is part of the body, right? And I always say, oh, your gut can have bias. Your gut can be doing pattern matching that isn't always can sometimes not be productive. And your heart, like you said, your heart can sometimes take you in directions. But if you're just like I totally agree that if you're just letting the COO like of your brain manage everything, you can manage yourself right into a joyless existence because it seems like the smart thing, smart versus wise, right?
Well, the brain, just by default, I mean, the amygdala is always on. There's always something that is wrong. Like, how often do we as adults wake up in the middle of the night in a panic? Like,
Yeah,
because there's something. I mean, and everything could be going really right, and we're still in the panic because what if? What.
right, right.
So, I mean, there's a reason why the Buddhists say to shut off the mind, because
Yeah.
it is always going and it's always repetitive. And 90% of our thinking is negative.
Mm.
So, play negates that.
So you brought up joy. Here's the thing I kind of struggle with. Like people, I have calls, many calls almost every day. I'm talking to different people. And the initial question is always, how are you? In fact, when we had a call recently, we started, how are you? And I always at this moment take a pause and say, well, like I personally in my little bubble of my life am basically fine, but the world seems very fraught, volatile. I'll just, I don't think it's a surprise to anyone who knows me. I'm not happy with a lot of things going on in the world. Um, and a lot of these things are very sad. A lot of them are very enraging, infuriating, outrageous, like all those emotions. And so part of me is like, how do we I've heard the term rest is resistance, and I've heard the term that self-care is, important to be in the fight for whatever your values are.
Mhm.
But like, how do you justify you got to train yourself, you got to practice, be a play practitioner, you've got to do this for yourself? Um, and I know there's a really good answer, but sometimes it's really hard for me to see it. So how do you when I'm
The,
feeling joyless, how do I justify seeking joy, I guess?
the truth of it is, it's a choice. I know it doesn't feel like a choice. What's happening outside of us isn't a choice. What's happening outside will happen. And regardless of, even if everything was peachy in the world, which I don't foresee happening anytime soon, just,
Right.
I mean, again, that's a bigger conversation, but it's going to happen regardless. You
Right.
know, you're going to have to do your taxes regardless. You're going to have to pay mortgage regardless. You're going to have to be under this administration regardless. You're going to, how you meet it makes all the difference. So you can let it affect you, or you can just, and it is absolutely a choice. And if somebody tells me to cheer up, I mean, people, my friends know better.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm pissed, I'm pissed. If I am sad, if I am grieving, don't tell me to be something else.
Right.
I need to go through that process. So it isn't like I'm, bubbly every single day. So that act of play to me is actually a form of resistance and a form of power and a form of resilience and a way that says you can't touch this. Regardless of what happens out there, you can't touch this. And that to me is worth more than winning 8 million lotteries, though I wouldn't mind that either.
It's interesting. I am reading for the first time. I read the Hunger Games trilogy
Oh,
just recently.
okay.
And have you read it? Just curious.
No, that's more Tracy, my wife's.
Yeah.
Not my thing.
So it's a dystopian authoritarian future. And I'm right now reading, there's 2 prequels that got published later. So I'm on the second one of those. Very, it's a good story. It's a gripping story. And there's so much about these characters who get, these kids basically who get sent to the Hunger Games, which is a fight to the death. And there's so much narrative about not wanting to let it change them, not wanting to be owned, but the people are putting them through this and they can't control it, but they're not going to let them own them. They are going to still, hold on to their humanity, hold on to who they are. There's a lot of that throughout the books that you just really reminded me of. So I think that is really instructive, to be like, how do you, and to the point about power having 2 meanings, how do you keep yourself powered on for the ways you will act in a world, the ways I'm a big person, I'm a big advocate of everyone can be an everyday activist for the things they most believe in. And there are many, many different ways to do that. And we all need to find our own lane. And how do you get the energy to do that? If all I do is feel bereft, that doesn't really energize me for the fight, so to speak. But just like you need to find your lane as an everyday activist and how you can use your skills and your nature and your personality, how do I figure out what kind of play I should, pursue? How do I know how to find the right way to charge myself up?
So I think that's a very good question, which leads me to the play personalities. And Dr. Stuart Brown came up with 8 play personalities, which are foundational to finding out how to play. So how what play might mean to you is very different than what it is for me. I'm a combination of the creative, the explorer, and the joker. And if I have a combination of the 3, I've got a little bit of storyteller in me as well. And I should name the other ones. One's the athlete, the competitor. I have them handy because I don't always remember it. So the athlete, so joker, athlete, explorer, competitor, director, collector, artist, creator, and storyteller. I do have a little bit of storyteller in me. Collector, I'm such a minimalist. So, but a collector might be like they love collecting stamps or cards or whatever it is. For me, it's just like, and I spend a lot of time producing and, taking care of things. The last thing I want to do is direct so there's things that are definitely not me. But what brings me a tremendous amount, that's why I love traveling, because I can, be lighthearted and be myself and joke around while traveling and be engaged with all sorts of creative things. Like travel to me is heaven. I could travel forever. So what are you?
I think I am a little bit of a director. Like I do like to, actually, it was in in the excerpt that we just published, I did list
like
them.
the like you like putting on events and bringing people together, and
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think I must be a little bit of like I'm not the athlete competitor or kinesthete.
They changed that to I think he changed it to mover because nobody could pronounce it.
Nobody could say it right. Like those are not my thing, but like um I do like to joke. I do like to I think I'm a little bit of the joker, a little bit of the director, and a little bit of the storyteller. Like when all those cousins, I remember so clearly that there was a whole crop of little girl cousins that were probably not even that. Now we all feel like we're the same age, but then I was probably 3 to 5 years older and felt like I was the grown up, and I would often babysit them, and a lot of what I would do is tell these long stories, and they were each different princesses, and it wasn't even about Disney because that was even before the revival of all the Disney princess stuff, but they were each their own little princess, and I would tell stories about them, and like that's how we would play. And so I think I've got that storyteller aspect and the director, and then I think the creator. I like to.
Well,
Yeah.
and it's interesting, much like the Enneagram or Myers-Briggs or whatever. I think that it is good to know, like my wife and I, we have a lot because she's also super creative, and she's a great storyteller. We have a lot of overlap, and I think that that's really great when you are dating someone, or about to get involved with a specific group.
Yeah.
And and you hear it all the time. Hey, why don't you, God, you're so serious, why don't you have fun, like the whole like cheer up, that kind of like
Yes. Smile more.
positivity. So whatever it is, and so what might be play for somebody else, I think I mentioned it to you before, but like when I met my wife, and I said, I love you. I said, I'm making three things clear. I don't do show tunes, which she loves, golf, which she loves, and country music, So what brings her joy, the way that she may play, is not necessarily the way that I do, but we do find the overlap. So when people are like, hey, come on, just have some fun. Well, what might feel like play to you is not play to them. Like to them, like somebody might want to come in and, like build a puzzle while listening to great music. And that to them is playing, while somebody else wants to jump up and down on a trampoline.
Yeah.
So, and people
and the different people can be different kinds of playmates, which I thought was a great point of what you wrote, is that some people want to do some play with you. I have friends I go see theater with. I have other friends who are not interested in seeing theater with me. And something my spouse and I do that we started actually, I mean, we've always both been kind of nerdy. So like the first date we ever had, we met on Match.com and we had our first date. And I was talking about the work I was doing. And at that time I was in traditional high tech, working for hardware companies actually. And he's a software engineer. And so he was just so like taken aback that I wanted to like talk about all this like nerdy tech stuff. But something we started during the pandemic, one of the first things we did is we decided to walk through and watch all of the Marvel Universe movies in chronological order. And now we're in an epic Star Trek watch through, starting with the original series, the animated series that most people don't even know exists, Next Gen, Deep Space Nine, Voyager. We're in Enterprise right now, and there's just so much more to come. And it just creates this whole like shared language. And he was already super into Star Trek, and I really wasn't, and so, and it takes a long time because we don't do it every single night or anything, but we have this, so we're collectors, I guess, of media experiences in that way. We like to like watch, we like to do the whole canon, the entire oeuvre. We started watching the Hunger Games movies because I read the book.
And it could be a little bit of the because It works the other way around. Like if you're a creator, you like watching creative things. If you're an athlete, you like watching
Oh, that's true.
sports. If you're a storyteller, you enjoy going to hear other people talk, or
Oh yeah. That's I love actually being a spectator of sports. I just went to the Bay
so there you go.
FC.
You're an athlete.
You notice I said spectate. I went to a Valkyries game last month, and I went to the Bay FC women's soccer here
Tracy
in
just
Tennessee.
went last night to the Valkyries.
Oh yeah, it was so fun, and I
Yeah.
like basically I watching sports is super. Maybe not golf. Don't tell Tracy, but maybe not watching golf, but. Anyway, so I think that's really, if you look at the excerpt that we published on optionality, it does list the 8 personalities. And of course, if you buy the book, Free to Be, a 6-week guide to reclaiming your soul, which as you know, as a fellow author, buy the book. I have it digitally, or I'd be holding it up right now. You will also be able to see, do you have a copy there you can hold up?
No, I used to, when I did my whole like media tour, I had like 18 of them. Like,
Right. I have one of mine that still sits here. Anyway, so buy the book because it is really both the science aspect, the personal aspect, the anecdotal aspect, and the workshop and kind of you work it out, giving you actual exercises. So it's a very comprehensive kind of guide to, especially, I know a lot of people, almost everyone I talk to these days is kind of trying to figure out how, to reclaim their soul because the world seems kind of different right now.
And it isn't, I also just want to make it clear that it isn't like some woo-woo book at all. It's very, very practical. So
yeah. I mean, I really appreciate that.
Their soul, and they're thinking, it's not like that.
No, I like the way you describe soul. Anyway, Shirin, thank you so much for joining us and kicking off this month of joy and rest and fun and play. I couldn't think of a better person to help us understand, why it's important and how to go about trying to put more of it into your life. So thanks very much. And everyone check out Shirin. Where is the best place to go find you online?
Finding me online, link on LinkedIn, on ShirinEtessam.com, and the book is Amazon, probably the easiest to find it.
Or bookshop.org, if you're into that. All right.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And it was really playful talking about play with you.
Yes, thanks.
All right. Take care.